All right, peace and blessings. It's your brother Asare. Back with another one. Excuse me. I know y'all see the title of the video. Uh, Polar rotation, serpent gods in the four signs. All right. So if you've been following some of the previous videos that we've been doing, we've been kind of playing hopscotch between the Sabaean phase um, and um, the history and the mythos of the Twa. You see what I'm saying? The Sabaean phase, meaning as described by Gerald Massey, out of the four phases of Egyptian culture, you have the Sabaean phase, the lunar phase, the solar lunar phase, and then finally the solar phase. Out of how Gerald Massey describes it in Natural Genesis. Um, and we've been kind of dealing with the mythos of the Twa, the pygmies. So a lot of Egyptian civilization was basically based around the mythos of the Twa. Those are the individuals that considered to be really the first African tribe, considered to be the creators of herbology, hunting techniques, metallurgy, all of the relevant sciences that the Egyptians utilized in dynastic Egypt, but they just the dynastic Egyptians just wrote it all down versus the Twa that did not write it down. So I know previously we talked about, let's see here, we talked about extensive long periods of time and everything like that. And we've talked about the history of the Twa. We talked about, in the last video, we talked about one of the I don't know, bullet points in their history would be the benchmark of them being in Sierra del Fuego, in the southern tip of South America, um, at least like 250,000 years ago. So that would be one of the benchmarks or bullet points as far as, I don't know, the timing that you can associate with them and everything like that. Um, as far as the Egyptians in previous videos, we talked about how the Egyptians have tens of thousands of years of history that they record and that is documented within their civilization. However, in particular, they make reference to a particular cycle where the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, and then rises in the east and sets in the west. They say they witnessed four such rotations like that. So that's one of the things that we're going to get into in this video. So the books that I'm going to reference in this, right? I'm going to reference this. Let's see, lifting the Gnostic Veil by the brother Malik Jabbar. And I'm going to also reference this when we get into the portion about the serpent gods and the four sons. Anybody who's familiar with Aztec, Mayan mythology, or whatever case may be. That's kind of going to get into some of that. But the book I'm going to use to reference some of that. It's a book. This book right here is called Ophiolatria, an account of the rites and mysteries connected with the origin, rise, and development of serpent worship. The author of that work is anonymous, right? All right, so let's get into some of this Malik Jabbar. Okay, I'm gonna go page 11, right? Page 11 from lifting the Gnostic veil, right? Okay, from this point forward, we shall adjust our terminology so as to distinguish between traditional Gnosticism and the ageless Gnosticism of the ancestors that was fashioned hand in glove with mythology as a means of correctly interpreting the encrypted language of mythology. We shall refer to the Gnosticism that represents the ability to interpret esoteric symbolism as Paleo-Gnosticism or Paleo-Gnostics, the Gnosticism that I have used in my other books to bring clarity to certain arcane scriptural symbolisms, and will use also within this book, shall henceforth be termed Paleo-Gnosticism or Paleo-Gnostics. This terminology should alleviate any possible confusion that otherwise might ensue. Paleo-Gnosticism is the original system used by the ancients to interpret mythology. It is important to understand that it is not a philosophy and definitely not a religion, but rather is a scientific methodology. As noted above, methodology was means by which the ancients recorded their cultural and scientific data in encrypted form. Okay, it's just like how we talked about on the last video. When we talk about paleo anything, we're talking about people who existed prior to the Holocene. We're talking about Pleistocene people. And we talk about the Pleistocene, the Holocene, that changed, and that's that period of history that you run into, that brick wall that you run into when you go to history around 12,000 BC. That's when the temperature changed. That's when things ceased to grow large on the planet as far as mastodons, mammoths, and things of that nature. We started to get smaller things. So something noticeably happened on to the planet at that time. But we have human beings in history on both sides of that. You see what I'm saying? So for all intents and purposes, when we say paleo equals Pleistocene equals pre-flood, because we get into we have events, whether mythologically assumed or otherwise, that punctuate this period of time, this period of 12,000 years. So this would be pre-flood or antediluvial. Anytime we hear paleo Pleistocene, that's pre-flood or antediluvial, right? Okay, we're gonna skip ahead to page 101. He has a whole chapter, by the way. Anybody who's interested in this cycle, this subject of this video that we're talking about, this polar rotation. He has a whole chapter in this particular book in regards to this. Okay, so our environment holds the potential for danger and death that goes far beyond the cognizance of most of us. I refer to the dangers embodied in the natural volatile character of the collective mother, this earthly parent, this erupting, unstable, evolving, dynamic, living thing bulging with fire and molten rocks, poison gas, arctic winds, flooding waters, pestilence, and deadly or mutilating radioactivity. Our planet and universe are ever changing. They are not stable. So some of the changes are apparently random, but others are cyclical and deadly. The ancients were successful in calculating some of our planet's cycles that tend to instigate adverse environmental traumas for the organisms that populate this planet, including humans and all other animals, as well as the plants, trees, what have you. Some of the symbolisms of the ancients were actually focused on these expanding planetary cycles that span beyond the seasonal cycles, and in some cases, even beyond the astrological cycles, 2,160 years, and beyond the precessional cycles of 25,920 years. The changes that occur and reoccur to our planet over millions of years are so drastic that the appellation destruction is justifiable but not accurate. The description transformation is more accurate. Okay, skipping forward to page 104. Our sun does not just hang suspended in space, but like all other stars, our sun is cycling through space. It takes the sun about 250 million years to make a complete revolution around the hub of the Milky Way galaxy, according to the astronomers. During the journey of 250 million years, the sun will take us, i.e., our planet Earth, and our sister planets into deep regions of space for unknown variations that may impact significantly upon our earthly environment. All right, still page 104. Okay, so aspects of the great cycle of axis rotation referenced in the book of Enoch. So he talks about, he has several passages from the book of Enoch that kind of go into that. Within this chapter, we shall discuss those large cycles that instigate dramatic changes in our earthly environment and climax with the grandest of the earthly cycles, which is the cycle that I call the great cycle of axis rotation. This is what he calls it in the book, or what have you. Okay, a cycle that spans 2,160,000 years. We shall uncover some of the obscure methods by which the ancients tracked and recorded those large cycles. We shall explain the astronomical variations that indicate the opening and closing of various stellar cycles that serve as profound indicators of significant alterations in the earthly environment. Right? Okay, so I'm about to get into page 109. I'm gonna just go over some of the stuff that he says. Again, I'm not reading all of the man's book. I think this is enough to wet your whistle if you were interested in some of the stuff, or some of the stuff he sounds like he's talking about astrotheology and stuff like that. He's one of the better authors in regards to this subject. He has some interesting material and everything like that. Um Page 109. Just gonna ride out for a little minute. Okay. Uh, okay. Tracking changes in the inclination of the Earth's axis. Okay. So, in truth, the Earth is continuously transfiguring itself climatically and geographically over thousands and millions of years. Unfortunately, many of us think that current climate conditions are the norm, but in fact, the planet does not have a norm over the long term, unless you want to call change the norm. The inhabitable regions of our planet undergo continuous transformations, variations, and relocations over the millennia, over many, many thousands of years. Of course, some who have studied these issues assert that some changes come quickly and catastrophically. However, I, in this essay, am focused on measuring changes as indicated in the mythology of the ancients. It is this measured altering of the earthly environment that I shall explain as we proceed, or more accurately, I shall say that I shall explain the symbolism related to this change and some of the methods used by the ancients in tracking time related to the Earth's axial migration. The ancients discovered that many of the Earth's upheavals and or drastic alterations of the climate were associated with the changing obliquity of the ecliptic, that is to say, the tilt of the Earth's axis through the plane of the ecliptic. Hence, the tracking of the gradual change in the Earth's axial orientation becomes of extreme importance, and much of the symbolism of the scriptures, as well as the architecture of various temples and monuments, were actually geared toward tracking the great cycle of axis rotation. Right? Okay, as I have already noted, the great cycle of axis rotation completes itself in the course of a cycle that spans 2,160,000 years. This is the span of time that it takes the celestial projection of the Earth's axis to rotate vertically from east to north, from north to west, from west to south, back to east. A cycle of 360 degrees at the rate of 1 degree every 6,000 years. Okay, at present, our Earth is tilted from the pole of the ecliptic at an angle of approximately 23.5 degrees. Therefore, 18,000 years from now, the angle will reduce to 20.5 degrees. That is a change of 1 degree of arc every 6,000 years. And of course, that means that 24,000 years ago, the tilt of the axis was 27.5 degrees from the ecliptic pole. The rate of axial rotation is measurable as 0.6 seconds of arc in 1 year, or 1 minute of arc every 100 years, 10 minutes of arc every 1,000 years, or 60 minutes of arc, 1 degree of arc every 6,000 years. Our planet is now inclined 23.5 degrees from the pole of the ecliptic. So in 141,000 years, 23.5 times 6,000 equals 141,000. Our Earth's celestial pole will be in union, angular similarity with the pole of the ecliptic, right? And we, or I say, our descendants will experience 1 season annually. So basically, he's talking about the tilt of the Earth. To all my flat Earth people, to the tilt of the Earth determines how long the seasons are going to be. You see what I'm saying? So he's talking about the Earth can be when it's even like that, or whatever case may be, you would just have 1 season all throughout the year. He talks about this. We're gonna get into this. He talks about how this determines the temperate zones on the planet. You see what I'm saying? This is stuff that ancient people knew about. Okay. Let's see. It is worth noting 3,000 years ago, when much of our scriptural information was being edited and organized, some monuments were being built. The Earth's axial incline was 24 degrees, and the span to union with the ecliptic pole was 144,000 years. Before I continue with the explanation of the great cycle of axial rotation, I should note that modern astronomers are aware of the fact that the Earth's axial orientation is not fixed. I don't think that they are aware of the implications of the ancient mythology in this regard, but nevertheless, they have calculated that the Earth's axis is not fixed to the present tilt of 23.5 degrees. They claim that the Earth's axis oscillates within a range of 2 degrees in a cycle that spans 41,000 years. They call this cycle the Milankovitch cycle. They give various scientific and astronomical reasons for why the Earth's axial orientation is not fixed, and claim that the variation is limited to a span of 2 degrees back and forth over 41,000 years. I can't imagine that academia as a whole will ever admit publicly, even if they are aware of it, that the axial inclination of the Earth revolves 360 degrees. The religious and social consequences will almost certainly be discombobulated. So basically, what he's saying, the ancient people had something figured out that modern people don't figure out. They don't even think that the thing that it opens up 360 degrees. They just think it's gonna open up 2 degrees and wobble again or something like that. Okay, to continue, the natural struggles and hardships that humans must endure and overcome in order to survive under the radically altered climatic and geological environments attendant to the Earth's upheavals that must accompany the continuous change of the Earth's axial incline are mind-boggling and, of course, not consistent with the monotheistic concept of a loving, doting God. Of course, we are primarily interested in the science of the ancients because they were scientists. They were intelligent people, like how we've been talking about in all these videos. Okay, and according to their science as revealed in their mythology, because like how he just said, their mythology, when they talked in mythology, they didn't just talk about this stuff for nothing or whatever case may be. This was a way of conveying information. Like how we talked about in previous videos, we talked about symbols. A symbol is like a flash drive or whatever case may be. One symbol can have hundreds of meanings or whatever. And it's a hack for your attention span. It's a way versus phonetic script or something where we have sounds that mean something. You have a symbol, it could have hundreds of meanings or whatever. So this was a technology to them. Mythology was a technology, just like how you have astrotheology, you have archaeoastronomy. The stories were a technology for them. Okay, moving right along. Okay, of course, we are primarily interested in the science of the ancients, and according to their science, as revealed in their mythology, the migration of the axis is not limited, but rather total and continuous at 360 degrees per cycle over 2,160,000 years. The truth of the ancients dictate that the changing inclination of the Earth's axis is not limited to or nearly as agreeable or non-threatening as our modern academics would like us to believe, although some modern scientists do believe that the ice ages are associated with the changing inclination of the Earth's axis that is as defined by the Milankovitch cycle. The assertions that I am offering are based solely on the interpretations of ancient mythology as decoded under Paleo-Gnostic methodology, right? He decoded their thought process. So he's basing it based off what they said it was, instead of coming up with some far-flung theory that's far left field. You know what I'm saying? These people been saying they in a location for 10,000 years, and you walk up there and say, man, y'all been here through 3 weeks. You know what I'm saying? That's insanity. Okay. So okay, by me and by some others who have previously written on or speculated on these matters. In fact, many have speculated on these matters. Implications of the changing inclination of the Earth's axis. The sun is the giver of the life giver and the governor of our planet, the lengths of our days and nights, the seasons. Now listen to this, all my people who think the Earth is flat. Okay, the sun is the life giver and governor of our planet, the lengths of our days and nights, the seasons, the climates, the volumes and boundaries of the seas, lakes, and rivers are all related to the sun, also the moon, and the dispersal of the sun's light on our planet. The dispersal of the sun's light upon the earth is tied directly to the obliquity of the ecliptic. The obliquity of the ecliptic is equal to the angle of inclination of the Earth's axial pole to the ecliptic pole. So, you know, you got the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun. You see what I'm saying? And then you got the celestial North Pole. So he's talking about basically the North Pole from a tilted perspective versus the North Pole from a perspective, the Earth traveling around the sun and everything like that. So that obliquity in that angle. The obliquity of the angle is the span or distance between the sun's position at the celestial equator, right? Let's see here, and its farthest point north or south of the celestial equator. This span is presently 23.5 degrees or so. When the sun is positioned at the celestial equator, we call the position the equinox. When the sun is positioned at 23.5 degrees north of the celestial equator, we call the position the summer solstice. When the sun is stationed 23.5 degrees, south of the celestial equator, we call that position the winter solstice. How seasons are determined by the obliquity of the ecliptic. Summer begins when the sun is at its highest in the earthly sky, 23.5 degrees above the celestial equator at the summer solstice. Winter begins when the sun is at its lowest point, 23.5 degrees south of the celestial equator at the winter solstice. And spring or fall begins when the sun is astride the equinox. The extent of the obliquity of the ecliptic changes in sync with the inclination of the Earth's axis to the plane of the ecliptic, or we can say the extent of the obliquity of the ecliptic changes in sync with and is equal to the change of the angle of the Earth's axial pole to the pole of the ecliptic. And you might have rewind this a couple times. I'm just trying to get through it. It is very easy to comprehend why the ancients were tenaciously focused on tracking changes in the extent or range of the obliquity of the ecliptic, which of course simultaneously provides correlating data on the changes in the Earth's axial inclination to the pole of the ecliptic, in that these changes are indicative of profound environmental impacts on the planet. So they were basically charting the periodic cycles that would mean that there was going to be some sort of catastrophe on the planet. That was one reason for their recording things in mythology. That was one reason for them building temples to observe the stars. That was one reason for them having astronomy and astrology. Period. Astronomy was not separate from astrology. You can be an astronomer and not know astrology, but you cannot be an astrologer and not know astronomy. Astrology is like astronomy calculus. Okay, so moving right along. Climatic zones and the obliquity of the ecliptic. The climatic zones of our planet are gauged in accordance with the extent of the obliquity of the ecliptic. We have three major climate zones on our planet. They are the tropics, the arctics, and the temperate. The tropic zone is the zone defined by the oscillation of the sun between the solstices. The Tropic of Cancer measures the 0 degrees latitude to 23.5 degrees north longitude, and the Tropic of Capricorn measures the 0 degrees latitude to 23.5 degrees south latitude. The entire region of 47 degrees expanse is the tropics. The Arctic zones are the regions within 23.5 degrees of the North Pole, and likewise the South Pole. The region from latitude 66.5 degrees north to 90 degrees north is defined as the Northern Arctic region, and the region from latitude 66.5 degrees south to 90 degrees south is defined as the Southern Arctic region. The regions that lay between 23.5 degrees north latitude and 66.5 degrees north latitude, and otherwise between 23.5 degrees south latitude and 66.5 degrees south latitude, are the temperate zones. The temperate zones carry the most favorable weather, not too hot and not too cold, but these zones are not constant due to the gradual changing inclination of the Earth's axis over many thousands of years. Okay, moving right along. Okay, the northern Arctic region does not receive sunlight year round, but is subject to about 6 months of daytime when the Earth is inclined toward the sun during the 6 months of the northern hemisphere's spring and summer, and about 6 months of darkness when the Earth is inclined away from the sun during the fall and winter seasons. The southern Arctic region experiences the same 6 months of daytime and nighttime in reverse sequence. Of course, this means that as the angle between the Earth's celestial pole and the ecliptic celestial pole expands or retracts over thousands and millions of years, these geological sections of the Earth that fall within the boundaries of this change will likewise experience day and night that run for months instead of in 24-hour cycles. So this tilt, this obliquity is the reason why we have 24-hour days. You see what I'm saying? Um, for instance, if the tilt of the Earth was at 60 degrees instead of 23.5 degrees, then fully all the area within the 6 degree of the poles would experience days of several months duration and nights of several months duration, as in the present case for our Arctic regions. When the planet is inclined at 90 degrees, fully half the planet will experience months of continual daylight and months of continual darkness. The inclinations are that the other planets in our solar system and would assume the whole universe undergoes the same rotations of their axes. The present axial inclinations of some other planets are as follows. Okay, and he goes into that a little bit. Okay, so the result of this let me see here. Okay, so this is page 114. I'm gonna wrap this up. Like I said, I wasn't really trying to read a whole chunk out the brother book, you know what I'm saying? But I just wanted to kind of lay that down because I know it's a lot of people talking about the earth flat and stuff like that. But basically, when you really understand, even ancient people understood this. Nobody thought that. There's only one demographic of people that we can identify that actually had that understanding. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so this let's see here. This is a difficult concept for many to wrap their brains around. Some of light waters in the southern hemisphere that spiral to the left instead of to the right when going down the drain. Herodotus, and this is the point, Herodotus made mention in his histories that the Egyptians told him that their history revealed to them that there was a time when the sun rose in the west instead of the east. And this is what we said on the last video. That's the point of this whole conversation or whatever. This obscure cycle that we've been referencing on in a couple of videos or what have you. Um, there have been there has been and is much speculation on the inversion of poles. I am convinced, according to my understanding of the ancient mythologies, that the ancients were studiously tracking cycles that related to the inversion of poles, or the gradual migration of the Earth's axis toward angular union with the ecliptic axis, and their fixation on the tracking was due to the fact that they viewed the migration of the celestial pole as a harbinger, say it with me, as a harbinger of possible severe environmental impact on their planet. So they wasn't just tracking, everything they did was for a reason, everything they did was practical. They wasn't just tracking this for nothing. They wasn't if it wasn't for their own entertainment or because the stars look pretty or nothing like that. Okay, the harbinger of possible severe environmental impact upon our planet. I write possibly severe because at some stages in the great cycle of axial rotation, the migration of the pole also indicates relief from oppressive environmental conditions. Man, okay, I know we kind of can breathe a little bit after that one. I know we kind of went in. That was the brother Malik Jabbar. That was lifting the Gnostic veil. Just read a little couple bits and pieces out of that one. But I kind of want to lay that down to kind of like lay a foundation, right? Because like how we talked about before, the Egyptians describe this same thing that we just talked about, the same axial flip that we just talked about, as happening 4 times, right? So this, I want to correlate this. This is similar to the story of the 5 sons in Mayan mythology, right? So now, with the Twa being in Sierra del Fuego as early as 250,000 years ago, that would suggest that the actual story that's being told in this mythology has the potential to be a lot older than the actual Mayan civilization that we see. Because I know people gonna date the Mayan civilization. They were only there since this time. They couldn't be talking about that. No, their mythology is older than them because they didn't come up with their mythology. If I'm not mistaken, that the Olmecs had a large part in coming up with their mythology and everything like that. So let's see, in the Mayan calendar is really the Olmec calendar. So it's a lot of that going on. Um, there's more research to be done. I know like the Mayans took a lot and learned a lot from the Olmecs, but I know that from my understanding, the Olmecs didn't advocate this whole blood sacrifice, human sacrifice thing. The Olmecs weren't really down with that. So um, we'll get into that a little bit. Um, but like I said, the Twa were in Sierra del Fuego 250,000 years ago, and that would suggest that the actual story that they tell in the Popol Vuh in the Mayan mythology is potentially older than the physical Mayan civilization, because as we know, the Mayans didn't build those pyramids or nothing like that. They just physically moved there or whatever or what have you. Let me see here. The dates are a little funny when we talk about the dates for the 5 sons. You see what I'm saying? When they talk about the 5 sons in Mayan mythology, we're talking about Tezcatlipoca, Quetzalcoatl, Tlaloc, Chalat, Chal, Chi, Liku, and Hutzilopachli. You know what I'm saying? I know I'm botching names like crazy, but the 5 sons, y'all Google it, y'all know, y'all see what I'm saying. We spoke previously in regards to this worldwide Ophidian worship, how we have snakes all over the planet, a snake worship all over the planet. Now we do have the Twa migrating all over the planet, as we talked about on the previous video. But as we kind of went into a lot of the mythos of the Twa in the previous video, the Twa were they're classed in certain categories as being Sabian in their lunar phase or what have you, or really the age of the Twa and the time on the planet of the Twa, they span both phases of the Sabian thing or whatever. But I really don't see them associated with serpent worship, and they're really a passive group of individuals or whatever case may be. I don't see them engaging in certain things or whatever. However, they make the distinction that the other Africans came from somewhere else. You see what I'm saying? And we see information uh, leading us to Ethiopia and the southern tip of Arabia and everything like that. We see cities of giants and things, cities associated with giants, megalithic structures and things of that nature, or what have you, as well as serpent worship. The same idea, like we talked in the previous video about the Sabian draconian origin of Tantra and everything like that. The Tantra, the draconian, the serpent worship is where you get Kundalini and everything like that. That was developed around the same time or whatever case may be. So in my research, from what I'm seeing, and I know a lot of people don't really divide this like this or whatever case may be, but I'm observing the mythology and all that, and I'm seeing two different currents, two different groups. Because realistically, I know as black people, I know a lot of times we don't see ourselves like that, but you're getting into a time basically where you have basically black people, but you're having different races of black people all in one. Because like how we talked to Paleo Americans and stuff like that, you got different iterations of different groups. Like the Neanderthals is one group, the Cro-Magnons is one group, but they're still iterations of the Twa. You see what I'm saying? As far as we can tell. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to go into this one, this Ophiolatria. We're gonna get into that a little bit. I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit. It talks about the history of this Ophidian worship. Now I'm correlating the five sons of Aztec mythology with this polar flipping cycle, this cycle in which the pole flips or whatever case may be. The Egyptians said that that's happened 4 times. That corresponds to cataclysmic events in the Earth's history or what have you. If we're in the fifth sun, then that means we've had 4 cataclysms and we're in the fifth actual sun or whatever case may be. So it will tie into that. Now, as far as the dates, as far as the timing of the Mayan the calendar, the dates are kind of funny as far as that's concerned or whatever, with this being a 2,160,000 year cycle or whatever, that doesn't quite correlate or what have you. So that's why I say it's kind of like still a theory of mine or whatever case may be, but I think it's worth noting. Yeah, so we're gonna get into this Ophioletria, and we're gonna get into this page 22. Really had to strain my eyes to see this one. The print is small, and I really underestimated this book is a small volume, but it really does pack a punch, as we will see. Okay, so uh, let's see here. Okay, so we have said that the principal god of the Aztec pantheon, subordinate only to the unity and corresponding to the Hindu Brahma, was Tezcatlipoca, Tonacatlicotl, or Tonacatlicutli. If we consult the etymology, I'm trying to take it slow because I know I'm finna butcher some words. Um, if we consult the etymology of those names, we shall find ample confirmation of the correctness of the dedication already drawn from the mythologies of the East. Thus, Tonacatlicutli embodied Lord Sun from Tonatiuh, Sun, Nekoya, or Catlu, body or person, and Tecutli, master or lord. Again, Tonacatlicotl, the serpent son, from Tonatia and cattle, as above the cotl is serpent. So when you see these suffixes on the words like quasi-cotl, the cotl in his name, is Serpent, and how he was talking about in that little section or whatever. All of their gods are basically serpents. You see what I'm saying? And all of them have an iteration of their name with that serpent prefix on it, whether it's a female deity or a male deity or whatever. But it's always codal, or it's another one that denotes a female. But all of their gods are serpents. So this is a whole pantheon of serpent deities, and he's just making it. He just expressing that the suffix codal, which you're gonna see on all of their names in some iteration, is just denoting them as a masculine or a feminine serpent. All right. Uh, okay. We have seen that the creator of the world, this is page 25. We have seen that the creator of the world, the great father of the Aztecs, Tenochtitlan or Tezcatlipoca, and his wife Cihuatl were not only symbolized as the sun and the moon, but also that they were uh, signated as the male and female serpent, and that in the mythological patterns, the pictures, the former was represented as a feather-headed snake. We have also seen that the incarnate or human representative of this deity, Quetzalcoatl, was also symbolized as a feathered serpent. This was in accordance with the symbol of the Aztecs, who represented cognate symbols and invested the impersonations or descendants of the greater gods in their emblems. So basically, just like how we talked about when we went into that Court of Shadows with Kenneth Grant, we talking about the Sabian, Typhonian, Draconian, or origin of Tantra and everything like that, Kundalini and all that stuff like that. And we were talking about it was a phase and period of time where serpent worship was dominant. In that period of time, it was the mother goddess and her son Satuk, right? So we just correlating it back with that. This is a whole phase of time that ends or culminates or ends, however you want to say it, around 12,000 BC with this event that takes place that we've been talking about. But prior to that, until God knows when, 100,000 years ago, 200, who knows, this serpent worship was going on, or whatever case may be, right? Okay, so this is page 38. Ancient paintings and sculptures abound with evidence of Mexican ophidiotria and prove that that there was scarcely a Mexican deity who was not symbolized by a serpent or dragon. Many deities appear holding serpents in their hands, and small figures of priests are represented with a snake over their head. This reminds us forcibly of the priests of the Egyptian Isis, who are described in sculpture with the sacred asp being a snake upon her head and a cone in the left hand, and to confirm the original mutual connection of all the serpent worshippers throughout all the ancient world. The Mexican paintings, as well as the Egyptians and Persian hieroglyphics, describe the Ophite hyogram of the intertwined serpents in almost all its varieties. A very remarkable one occurs in M. Allard's collection of sculptures in which the dragons forming it have each a man's head in his mouth. The gods of Mexico are frequently pictured fighting with serpents and dragons, and gods and sometimes men are represented in conversation with the same loathsome creatures. There is scarcely indeed a feature in the mystery of Ophidiotria which may not be resonated in the Mexican superstition. We perceive, therefore, that in the kingdom of Mexico, the serpent was sacred and emblematic of more gods than one. An observation which may be extended to almost every other nation which adorn this symbolic serpent. This is remarkable and valuable fact, and it discovers in Opheliotra another feature of its aboriginal character. From it proves the serpent to have been a symbol of intrinsic divinity and not a mere representative of peculiar properties which belong to some gods and not to others. All right. Okay, I'm going back to page 3. Um, I'll kind of get into this. Okay, Sanchoniathon. Sanchoniathon is the guy who writes the history of the Phoenicians or what have you. So if you make the contrast to some of his work, you'll see that there is no Greek mythology. The Greek mythology is a knockoff of Phoenician mythology. Okay, so Sanchoniathon makes mention of the history which he once wrote upon the worship of the serpent. All right. Uh, Okay, Sanchoniathon makes mention of the history, which he once wrote upon the worship of the serpent. The title of this work, according to Eusebius, was Ethiopion or Ethiopia. Another treatise upon the same subject was written by Pheroces Tyrus, which was probably a copy of the former, for he is said to have composed it from some previous um, accounts of the Phoenicians. The title of his book was The Theology of Ophion. You notice it's a common thing. You're gonna keep hearing this Ophias, because you're gonna run into different words and stuff like that. Just like how you have the word Ab. Remember we said in Arabia, nothing is older than Ad, the Adites, the Thamudites, these lost tribes of Arabians and stuff like that. Well, Ad, a the D and the if you interchange the D, the uh, ad changes into ab. You see what I'm saying? Ad changes into ab changes into app, app changes into op changes into off, like Ophidian. You see what I'm saying? And you're gonna see that, and like I said, ad is also a reference to a serpent. You see what I'm saying? We'll get into that. Okay, so the theogony of Ophion, styled Ophinius, and his worshippers were called Ophiodae. Thoth and Athoth were certainly titles of the deity in the Gentile world. Okay, so he's saying Thoth was associated with this Ophidian current. And the book of Sanchoniathon might very possibly have been from hence named Ethiopion, or more truly Aethiopion. Sounds like Ethiopian, don't it? But from subject upon which it was written, as well as from the treatise of Pharisees, we have reasons to think that Ethiopion or Aethiopion was a mistake from Athophion. You see what I'm saying? A title which more immediately related to that worship of which the writer treatise. Ath, ATH, was a sacred title, as we have shown, and we imagine that this dissertation did not barely relate to the serpentine deity, right, but contained accounts of his votiaries, the Ophitia, the principal of which were the sons of Chus. The worship of the serpent began amongst them, and they were from thence denominated Ethiopians or Ethiopians, which the Greeks rendered Ethiopies. They did not receive this name from their complexion, because the thing comes from it's often said that Ethiopians are called that because of their complexion. They're dark people, as has sometimes been surmised, for the branch of foot and the lihim were probably of a deeper dye. They were darker black people than them, so they didn't get the title from their complexion. But they were most likely so called from eighth op and eighth opus, the god which they worship. This may be shown from Pliny. He says that the country Ethiopia and subsequently the people had the name of Ethiop from a personage who was a deity, Ethiop Volcani Filio. Ethiops of Ethiops brought these rites into Greece, because remember how we were talking about Phoenicians considered themselves Ethiopians, and Greek mythology is just a knockoff of Phoenician Ethiopian mythology. So we'll continue, and called the island where they first established them Eliops, Solus Serpentinus Insula. It was the same as Ebios, a name of the like purport, in which the island was given the name Ethiopium. Eubea is probably Ob Aya, and signifies the serpent island, the same worship prevailing amongst the Hyperboreans, as we may judge from the name of the sacred woman who used to come annually to Delos. Those were priestesses of the Tauric goddess. Hercules was esteemed the chief god, the same as Kronos, and was said to have produced the mundane egg. He was represented in the Orphic theology under the mixed symbol of a lion and a serpent, and sometimes of a serpent only. Ain't no Hercules. Hercules comes from Melkort. Melkort is Phoenician. right? Okay, so the Kuthites, under the title of Heliadi, having settled at Rhodes as they were Hivites or Ophites, the island was consequence named Ophius. See all this Oph stuff like Ophidian? There was likewise a tradition that it had once swamped with serpents. Bocart says the island is said to have been Rhodus, from Rhode, a Syriac word for serpent. The like notion prevailed almost in every place where they settled. They came under the more general titles of Lelegas and Pelagi. Remember how we talking about the Pelagians? So it's leaning here that the Pelagians were just another group of Ethiopians, which it would make sense. Okay, let's see here. Where we at? Where we at? Okay, Pelagia, but more particularly of Elopians, Europeans, Oropians, Asopians, Enopians, Ophiopians, and Ethiops, as appears from the names which they bequeath. And in many places where they resided, there were handed down traditions which alluded to the original title of Ophites in Phrygia and upon the Hellespont, whether they sent out colonies very early, was a okay, peep this, was a people styled the Ophiogenes, or the serpent breed, who were said to retain an affinity and correspondence with serpents. So it gets kind of weird. It starts to get kind of weird. Like when we keep digging for this stuff, I wasn't asking to find giants, but when we keep digging for this stuff, we find giants. We keep digging for this stuff, we find serpent worship, and we're gonna keep reading. We're gonna find serpents that walk on two legs, or Ophite race of beings that's mentioned in this. I didn't, I'm real conservative with the extraterrestrial and all that stuff. I don't talk about. I ain't heavy on the extraterrestrial thing. I leave that to y'all. You see what I'm saying? If that's what you choose to put on it, but I can't help but to run. This is stuff I can't help but to run into. Okay, so okay, and a notion prevailed that some hero who had conducted them, who was changed from a serpent to a man. In Calchos was a river Ophis, and there was another of the same name in Arcadia. It was so named from the body of people who settled upon this river, and was said to have been conducted by a serpent. So basically, we getting into a lot of this stuff. My point in even getting into a lot of this, like how we getting from the pole flip to this. Well, the pole flip is mentioned in I think that's what the different sons are talking about in the Mayan mythology. And in the Mayan story, all of their deities are snakes. And this snake thing, like we did the Sabian origin of Tantra and all that, that's a big deal in the ancient world. But as as we also run into a demographic of people that spread all over the world that didn't really deal with the snake worship that we can see as far as the twice. So it's an interesting story and thing that's kind of shaping up. It kind of reminds me of some of the stuff that was said by Credo Mutwa in regards to this stuff, in regards to the reptilians and stuff like that, in his interview with David Icke or whatever. Again, I'm real conservative on the extraterrestrial thing. I let y'all put that sauce on it yourself. I'm just really kicking it on the bibliography level, just to let you know that you can find this stuff in mainstream sources. Okay, to continue. It is said that these reptiles are seldom found in the islands, but the Tenos, one of the Cyclades, was supposed to have once swarmed with them. This Thucydides mentioned a people of Ethiopia called Ophinians, and the temple of Apollo at Petra in Lycia seemed to have had its first institution from a princess of the same name. The island of Cyprus was called Ophiusa, and Ophioides, from the serpents with which it was supposed to have been abounded. Of what species they were is nowhere mentioned, expecting only that about Paphos there was said to have been a kind of serpent. Peep game. And about Paphos, there was said to have been a kind of serpent with two legs, right? So this is the same stuff we run into when we research the Ubaid period. Look up the Ubaid period in Iraq, Ubaid period, and you're gonna see a reptile with two legs with an afro that looked like Marge Simpson. You see what I'm saying? All right. So by this is meant the Ophite race. So now it's talking about a serpent race. What are you talking about? I didn't write this. I did. This is in there. It's in there like ragu. By this is meant the Ophite race who came from Egypt and from Syria and got footing in this island. They settled also in Crete, where they increased greatly in numbers, so that Minos was said by an unseemly allegory, Ophis, Oruse, Serpentis, Menexe. The island Seraphis was one vast rock by the Romans called Saxum Seriphium and made use of as a large kind of prison for banished persons. It is represented as having once abounded with serpents, and it is styled by Virgil Serpentiferu, and the passage is corrected by Scaliger. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. We're almost finished with this. I'm just making a point because um, it's no coincidence that, let's say, like the group of people that have um, this depiction of one of the most ancient um, expanses of time so happens to be a pantheon full of serpents. You see what I'm saying? Quite interesting. Okay, so all right. It is said that the Greek, let's see, that by the Greeks, Medusa's head was brought by Perseus. By this, it is meant the serpent deity whose worship was here introduced by people called Parisians. Medusa's head denoted divine wisdom, and the island was sacred to the serpent, and as is apparent from its name. The Athenians were esteemed serpentingia, and they had a tradition that the chief guardian of the Acropolis was a serpent. So when we get into like the first king of Athens or whatever case may be, this guy's gonna be half serpent. So we getting into that. And like I said, when you think of the Greeks that I'm talking about, we're not talking about the Hellenistic Greeks that 700 BC, when Hesiod writes the Theogony to 323 BC, when Alexander the Great, excuse me, Alexander the Great dies or whatever. What we talking about is Pelagians. We talking about prior to the Greek Dark Ages. Look up the Greek Dark Ages. Prior to the Greek Dark Ages, prior to the Minoans, prior to the Mycenaeans. We're talking about back into the days of the Pelagians, prior to even the fame of Hercules. We're talking about the first of their heroes when all their cities were being built and stuff like that. We're going back. Okay, so yeah. So let's see here. Okay, it is reported of the goddess Circe that she placed a dragon for a guardian to her temple at Eleusis, and that's where you get the Elysian mysteries from and everything like that, and appointed another to attend upon Erechtheus. Peep game. Aegeus of Athens, also called Cecrop I, you see him, according to Androtion, was of the serpent breed, and the first king of the country is said to have been a dragon. Others make Cecrops the first who reigned. He is said to have been of a twofold nature, being formed with the body of a man blended with that of a serpent. Diodorus says that this was a circumstance deemed by the Athenians inexplicable, yet he labors to explain it by representing Cecrops as half man and half brute because he had been of two different communities. Estius likewise tries to solve it nearly upon the same principles and with the like success. Some have said that Cecrops that he underwent a metamorphosis, being changed from a serpent to a man. So we're still running into these stories about a literal group of serpent people, and I'm not gonna really put no extra sauce on that. I'm just reading what it say, and I'm gonna just sit there right there, and that y'all be the judge. But we just I let the implications run in your mind. But we're just going into all this, but we can clearly see serpents, and they're not really talking. And in most of these cases, it's not a symbolic thing that they're dealing with. You see what I'm saying? Okay, let's move along. Okay, the natives of Thebes in Boeotia, like the Athenians, esteem themselves of the serpent race. The Lacedaemonians likewise refer themselves to the same origin. Their city is said of old to have swarmed with serpents. The same is said of the city of Amyle in Italy, which was Spartan of origin. They came hither in such abundance that it was abandoned by the inhabitants. Argos, that's in Greece. Argos, if I'm not mistaken, that's a Pelagian city as well. Argos was infested in the same manner till Apis came from Egypt and settled in that city. He was a prophet, the reputed son of Apollo. And let's see, in the story of Apollo and Python, that ain't nothing but Bess in the Serpent. That's the same thing we talking about in the previous video. That's Bess in the Serpent anyway. Let me see here. I'm trying to scroll down, so it's gonna take a day. I'm almost finished. Let's see here. Diosdorus Siculus seems to understand that this literally but a region that was annually overflowed, and that for so long a season could not well be uh, liable to such calamity. They were serpents of another nature, with which it was thus infested, and the history relates to the Kuthites, the original Ophitia, okay, who for a long time possessed that country. Uh, they passed from Egypt to Syria and to the Euphrates, and mention is made of a particular breed of serpents upon the river, which were harmless to the natives but fatal to anyone else. This can hardly be taken literally, for whatever may be the wisdom of the serpent, it cannot be sufficient to make these distinctions. These serpents were of the same nature as the birds of Diomedes and the dogs in the temple of Vulcan. Let's see here. The Kuthite priests are said to have been very learned, and as they were Ophites, whoever had the advantage of the information was said to have been instructed by uh, serpents. Okay, and I'm gonna go down this last part, this page 5, and then we're gonna wrap it up. I know we've been rocking about an hour. All right, let's see here. As the worship of the serpents was of old so prevalent, many places as well as people from thence received their names. People were named after serpent. Places were named after serpent. So you can see that when you look up the etymology of places. Those who settled in Campania were called Opiki, which some would have changed to Ofiki, like Ophidian, like how that we're seeing that again in these words, because they were denominated from serpents. They are in reality both names of the same purport and denote the origin of the people. The people were said to be descended from serpents. I think the people of Cambodia are said to be descended from serpents. This is not something that they that this exclusive to this. We meet the places called Opis, Ophis, Ophitica, Ophinia, Ophios, Ophsa, Ophiodes, and Ophiusa. This last was an ancient name by which, according to Stephanus, the island of Rhodes, Cythus, Besbica, Tinas, and the whole country of Africa was distinguished. So he's saying a lot of Africa has snake motifs and everything like that, because by some accounts, that's the origin of the snake worship. Okay, there were also cities called Ad, like the city we talked about in Arabia, the Adites, nothing older than the Adites. We talked about the 12 lost tribes of Arabians and stuff like that precede um, um, that precede the biblical flood, and then they reestablished the power center in Sheba after the biblical flood, according to the sources we read. Okay, so add to these places denominated Ubath, Obana, and reversed Anoba from Ab. Remember we said Ab, all that's interchangeable in ways, which was the same purport. Clements of Alexandria says that the term Eva, as in like how we say Eve, like Adam and Eve, signifies a serpent. It pronounced with a proper aspirate. The Epiphanius says the same thing. We find that there were places of this name. There was a city of Eve in Arcadia and another in Macedonia. There was also a Mount Eva or Evan, taken notice by Pausanias, between which and it Ithome lay the city Messene. He mentions also an Eva in Argolos and speaks of it as a large town. Another name for a serpent, which we have not yet noticed, was Patan or Pitan. Many places in different parts were designated from the term. Among others, we was a city of Lucina and another in Mysia, which Stephanus styles a city of Aeolia. Aeolia is the Aeolians are one of the original four tribes of Greeks. Okay, they were undoubtedly so named from the worship of the serpent. Piton had probably Draconia, uh, uh, which were figures and devices relative to the religion which prevailed. Ovid mentions to the latter city and has some allusions to its ancient history when he describes Medea as flying through the air from Athens to Colchis. The city was situated upon the ruined Eva, excuse me, or Evan, which the Greeks rendered Evanus. According to Strabo, it is compounded Eva Ain, the fountain or river of Eva, the serpent. It is remarkable that Opiki, who are said to have been named from serpents, had also the name of Pitanta. At least one part of that family was so called. Pitanta is a term the same purport as Opiki and relates to the votaries of Piton, the serpent deity, which was adorned by the people. Melanius was of the old Pitanites and was learned from Histius, and the reason of it may be known from him being a Spartan, by which he was initiated one of the Serpentigi or Ophanites. Hence, he was represented with a serpent for a device upon his shield. It was said that the brigade or portion of the infantry was among some of the Greeks named Pentanti. Okay, I'm skipping ahead a little bit and going to wrap this up. What had already been said has thrown some light upon the history of this primitive idolatry, and we have shown that whatever any of these Ophite colonies settled. So it's saying it's basically saying that it's a certain different demographic of people, serpent worshippers, down to who descended from, let's say, or who are associated with a serpent race, whether you believe that to be their oral history, mythology, story they tell, or whether you believe that to be a literal thing. Okay, they left behind from their rites and institutions as well as from their names, which they bequeathed to places, ample memorials by which they may be clearly traced. Okay, so with all that being said, I know we went around the world. We talked about the polar flip or the polar inversion, the polar rotation, whatever you want to call it. We went into that, and we also went into one of the most prominent civilizations that kind of touches on this obscure thing within their mythology. They kind of have it more blatantly. Like you look at the Mayan calendar, the four pieces around the centerpiece, those are the four suns and how the world ended or whatever. So it's prominent in their mythology. It exists in the Egyptian iconography, but you kind of got to dig for it a little bit or whatever case may be. And there's no coincidence that civilization is ancient. Is that is as the events that they're describing is presided over by serpent deities or what have you. And as we said before, serpent worship is the most ancient worship on the planet, and it's kind of going. We just kind of been going into that or whatever case may be. Like a lot of this actually reasons out. So now, based on this, we know that there was an Ophidian current all over the planet, sending us in the direction of Ethiopia. How we talked about the Adites and all that in earlier videos, the southern tip of Arabia and all that. And however, from the stories of the Twa, they were borderline monotheistic. You see what I'm saying? So in Egypt, you can see a blending of these two influences, that of the Ophidian and that of the Twa. Because when you start getting the Twa, the lunar phase, or whatever, they're killing the serpent. They got a story in the Twa mythos that Ife is killed by the serpent and then he's resurrected and he kills the serpent. So they're at odds with the serpent in their mythology at some point, or whatever case may be. And even when they come about and gain a level of prominence, your serpent worship kind of goes a little bit underground or whatever. The code of Soot is at odds with the code of Osiris, which, as we've seen on previous video, is kind of intertwined with the mythos of the Twa. So we eventually get motifs of the Dragon Slayer, starting with Bes, visible in the lunar phase of Egypt. However, we see the Kundalini and Tantra spring up from serpent worship around the same time. So we can see the competing thing between these two ideologies or these two currents. We also talked about like how even if it continues to dynastic Egypt, when you have the contention between the serpent cult of the Typhonians, or what history recalls as the Hyksos, versus the followers of the solar cults and everything like that. Let me see here. Yeah, so this is it's also a glimpse to the story that was ongoing prior to the biblical flood. So whatever this was that we witnessing between these two groups, whatever the serpent worshippers and whatever the Twa had going on, or whatever case may be, I'm not trying to put no extra sauce on it and paint the picture for you or whatever, but we lay out the we lay as we observe the information or whatever, we can see those two currents, and we can see at some point there's a level of contention in between them, and we can see that kind of play out um, in the ancient civilization that we know of is ancient Egypt. But that's all I have for y'all today, man. I know it's been a long ride, an hour and some change, but I appreciate y'all for rocking with me. If y'all kind of like some of these little pieces we've been doing, like and subscribe, man. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate the love. Peace.